having me, and of course the Young Americans Foundation for bringing this event together. We have a lot to talk about, and I want to hear from as many of you as possible. So if you're a liberal in the audience, want to raise your hand? Self-identify? All right, awesome. Congratulations. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you learned something. And the fact that you are here means that you're open and minded enough to want to listen. I hope you read my books. I hope you read and watch all the things that the Southern Poverty Law Center says that you shouldn't read or watch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you learned something, and my advice to other young liberals who may be watching on the live stream is don't be a sheep. Question authority, save yourselves. And if you're unwilling to do so, then I can't help you. None of us can help you, no matter how many lectures we do. It's a lost cause, and it's time to move on. I've done these YAP events for nearly 20 years now, and usually such speeches are aimed at the left and the Democrats to show how they're wrong, they're evil, they have double standards, they're the real haters, they are the real racists. All of those things are true, and I've made these arguments in earnest for many, 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 many years. But tonight is not about you, lefties. Tonight, my remarks are directed at the young men and women of this country who identify as America First conservatives. I was going to ask how many of you identify as such, how many of you are proud Americans for American freedom and sovereignty. And from the room, I hear that we are the majority, and we're the majority in this room, and we're the majority in this country. I know what it's like to be in your shoes, feeling marginalized on a crazy college campus or wherever you make your life and living, for standing up for your pro-life, pro-gun, pro-truly free speech, pro-Western values and your faith, and for fighting for our country. I also have two teenagers who have been through experiences like you have, sitting in classrooms where abject stupidity and emotionalism have replaced logic, reason, and the pursuit of truth. And that is why I will not be using this blessed and privileged platform and my position to insult you, to marginalize you, or to shout you down. Just a couple of days ago, here on this very campus, someone I know, a former Fox News colleague, Kimberly Guilfoyle, sneered that young conservatives, men in MAGA hats, asking inconvenient questions, were somehow rude losers who could only get dates online and who were embarrassing their parents. There's another speaker, somebody I've known a long time, and you all know him, Ben Shapiro, who unfortunately repeatedly denigrated, let's be civil, repeatedly denigrated, so I can finish my sentence here, repeatedly denigrated an entire movement of young men who watch, yes, a YouTuber named Nick Fuentes. And who are these young men seeking answers to tough questions, the same questions that I've been asking out loud for 25 plus years about where America is headed. These young men were mocked as masturbating losers in their basements who share memes. And I will tell you that as a mom with brilliant, right-thinking kids who, yes, live in my basement and who, yes, share memes, I found this obsessive reference, and many on the so-called right are obsessed with it, obsessed with young people's dating habits and lives. These are prominent adult conservative media personalities, much older than their targets. It's tellingly defensive, it's cringe, it's touchy, and it's also creepy. Here is my message to the new generation of America Firsters, exposing the big lies of the anti-American open borders establishment and its controlled opposition. If I were your mom, I'd be proud as hell. I want you to know that you are not alone, that it's important for you to know that not everyone who belongs to generations older than you has sat idly by while America rotted from the inside. Not all Gen Xers like me, or boomers, are mindlessly stupefied by the bread and circuses entertainment dished out by so-called conservative media. Not all of us have occupied ourselves solely with owning libs and reciting clunky MAGA rap anthems while America crumbles. I'm old enough to have lived and worked right here in California when it was a red state. I was here in the 1990s when America First patriots fought valiantly to protect it. This month, as the informed among you know, marks the 25th anniversary of the passage of Proposition 187, the Save Our State initiative. It was spearheaded by boomer grassroots sovereignty activists right here in Southern California, people who became my friends. They were heroes to me, like Glenn Spencer and Barbara Coe. I met them in 1994 when I was just a 24-year-old cub journalist at the Los Angeles Daily News. The media was against them, big business, Hollywood, and the Soros smear machine. They, like so many of the new generation, were labeled hate mongers and xenophobes. I called them patriots. I reported on their movement, and I proudly voted for SOS. Prop 187 passed by a whopping 59 to 41% margin. Yes. We old guard patriots, we upholders of the rule of law, we conservers and preservers of one nation under God were the majority back then. And that same year, Republican Governor Pete Wilson, who championed the ballot measure, won with 55% of the vote, including 23% of Latino voters who backed the measure. Unfortunately, and alas, that victory was illusory. A liberal federal judge struck it down, and the same thing happened when a similar set of boomer-era patriots spearheaded SB 1070 in Arizona to turn off illegal immigration spigots in 2010. There were other noble attempts to challenge the open borders elite long before Donald Trump. The godfather of America First, Patrick J. Buchanan. Yeah. Ran in 1992 on the sovereignty platform and has penned prolific books and prophetic editorials and columnists since he started his career in the newspaper business at the age of 23 in the early 1960s. My friend and fellow Coloradan, Tom Tancredo, made border security and immigration enforcement the primary focus of his presidential campaign in 2008. And many of us oldsters in the conservative blogosphere and talk radio led the battle against the Bush-Rove Chamber of Commerce amnesties in 2000 and 2007, and yes, you can boo lustily. These so-called conservatives in Open Borders, Inc. were the ones making common cause with the radical identity politics left. Before, there was Charlie Kirk, there was Paul Ryan, and John McCain, and Jack Kemp. The same establishment beltway crack weasels denigrating the new generation of America Firsters now were the ones who actively obstructed and smeared the previous generation as racists and xenophobes and anti-Semites. These were the ones who were either actively obstructing or passively sitting on the sidelines at cocktail parties or in green rooms or on cruise ships, schmoozing while America burned. But all of the efforts to beat back the tide were for naught. Math had already sealed California's ineluctable shift to the left by the time Prop 187 was launched. It wasn't a backlash to Pete Wilson that turned California blue as the lying liars of the Talking Points GOP stooge set continue to propagandize to this day. It's a lie, and I call bullshit. And you must too. The two numbers that matter the most are 1965 and 1986. Prop 187's valiant attempt to stem the tide, Ted Kennedy's floodgate-busting Hart-Celler Act, and Ronald Reagan's Amnesty Codifying Immigration Reform and Control Act paved the way for our half-century-long demographic nightmare. After 1986, amnesty begat amnesty begat amnesty. Mass illegal immigration was compounded by mass legal migration from the third world and jihadist breeding grounds, supplemented by the UN-led refugee resettlement dump that enriched open borders religious moochers from every denomination, Catholic, Lutheran, Jewish, Episcopalian. Add that to expansive guest worker pipelines and multiply it by chain migration. Do the math. Behind closed doors, the Soros SPLC left cackles about the grand hoodwinking of America and the success of their demographic reconquista. What a word. In public, they attack any truth tellers as conspiracists peddling the great replacement theory. Oh, like the Soros hitmen of Media Matters who likened me to the Tree of Life synagogue shooter in September for exposing the financiers behind demographic disaster. It isn't a conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. Who cares what the Media Matters monkeys say? I don't. I don't care. But you know who does? Conservatism, Inc., the rights subsidiary of Open Borders, Inc., filled with smug and complacent coastal elites who tremble at Soros and the SPLC's defamatory labels and who thirstily seek the constant approbation of leftists who will always hate them. It used to be that conservatives were for facts. Liberals were for feelings. Now it is considered racist or cynical to look at lockstep liberal voting patterns of waves of amnestied and naturalized immigrants and fear for the future. Voting patterns are malleable, we are told. I call. Let's look at the exit polls on Asian American voters who turned out for last week's national elections. Asian American voter ID was split 51-10 D's over R's in Virginia, 80-16 D's over R's for the House of Delegate votes there, and 81-15 D's over R's for the state Senate. Asian American voters supported stricter gun control 71-20. And they supported impeachment 64-17. The top presidential candidates for those surveyed were Biden, Warren, and Sanders. In Philadelphia, Asian American voters' ID split was 65-6 D's over R's. They voted for the Dem mayoral candidate 74-3, and their top three presidential candidates were Biden, Warren, and Yang. Asian Americans in Philadelphia favored impeachment 68-7. In Houston, Texas, yeehaw, Asian American voter ID split 30-30 D's over R's. Woo! The top presidential candidate was Trump at 38, Biden at 15, and Warren at 12. And Asian Americans in Houston supported more gun control by 58-24. What is wrong with you? And were evenly split on impeachment 41-41. Time and again, the Beltway, deep-pocketed GOP Republicans and their strategists have given in on amnesty, H-1B, and identity politics appeasing initiatives. And yet, the voting numbers among Asians, Hispanics, Muslims, and blacks for that matter has hardly budged. Newsflash. It's not gonna budge. Do the math. This was my gentle, maternal admonition to young people who were involved in the movement to persuade immigrants and minorities to exit the left and vote right. Of course, it's a good thing to reach out to non-traditional constituencies. But whatever dent you make in 2020 will be inconsequential compared to the relentless influx of 80-20 immigrants, including the 1 million new green card holders every year on a path to citizenship, plus the 800,000 DACA recipients hurtling towards citizenship, plus the 500,000 F1 foreign student visa holders that Conservatism Inc. and Silicon Valley are itching to award green cards and citizenship to. Of course, you know what I'm referring to. I wrote a piece for American Greatness on the stupidity of stapling green cards to the diplomas of unlimited numbers of F1 student holders. Now, I understand that people have had epiphanies on this, to which I say, I suppose better late than never. But if you are going to be dispatched as a conservative leader crusading for America first, perhaps you should have thought more than 1 minute about the policies that you're espousing. And these late-minute epiphanies, which curiously are not explained, what is it? What new information was gained that enlightened you to these things? Are often botched, and the doubling down of stupidity is also cringe. Word to conservative leaders, don't be cringe. Don't be cringe. It is wrong to misinform college students on campus, American college students on campus, that the staple program somehow will benefit the American economy because there will be electoral gains reaped. Call bullshit. I call bullshit. The numbers do not lie. And let's get our details right. If you're going to walk back the staple plan, you're not walking back awarding the F1 student visas. That's not what Charlie Kirk said. He didn't understand that what he was advocating was a clear path to citizenship for unlimited numbers of F1 student visa holders from around the world who will directly compete with American students who've been deluded into thinking, especially if they are STEM majors, that they will have a guarantee of good jobs in this country. That's not America first. That's Microsoft first. Yeah. And American students last. America First activists are now being accused of engaging in dangerous, quote, identity politics and, quote, ethno-nationalism. I have been called a Filipino brown white supremacist. The hypocrisy overflows. It's the detractors of America First on the right who have shamelessly indulged in identity politics tokenism, promoting a rainbow of brand ambassadors who don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to the most existential issue of our time. These are the people who immediately smear critics with the same old worn brushes used by the radical left. America First detractors indignantly demand that we young and old sovereignty advocates disavow, disavow, disavow. Well, the conservative inkers now have their knives out for me, and they always did. Recycling Media Matters Oppo research, uncovering things that I've never covered up in the 25 plus years that I've reported and advocated on sovereignty issues of the last quarter century. They want me to disavow Nick Fuentes and V-Dare and Peter Brimelow and Faith Goldie and Gavin McInnes and the Proud Boys and Steve King and Laura Loomer and on and on. They want me to do what they've done to brilliant academics and intellectuals who've told the truth, like Amy Wax at the University of Pennsylvania and Darren Beatty and Jason Tisdale. No, I don't agree with every last thing that all of the people that I've listed have ever said or written or published or tweeted or thought in their heads and their inside voices or outside. But I will not disavow any of them, and I will not join the deplatforming witch hunters who hypocritically call themselves free speech and culture warriors. I disavow violence. I disavow hatred of America. I disavow the systematic bipartisan betrayal of American students, citizens, and families by cynical politicians who promised for 20 years to build a wall, end the diversity visa lottery, end chain migration, all the memorized talking points to deflect their true agenda. I am not impressed. I'm not going to rehabilitate someone who has thoughtlessly recycled GOP talking points GOP, while screwing you. I disavow Republicans who told us to hold our noses and vote for open door sellouts because, you know, we support the Second Amendment and religious liberty, we're against abortion, and we were told over and over again by the elites, you don't have any other choice. Where are the calls to disavow the organizers of CPAC who banned young nationalists who are the future of this country? The leaders of CPAC who credentialed and allowed into the building right-wing watch hitmen, Soros-funded posing as so-called journalists. I disavow the bullshit.
Yeah.
Young people, left or right, I implore you, do your homework, open your eyes, join forces, or else you're screwed, and we're all screwed. Fight the controlled opposition, don't become it. The torch is being passed. The populist youth movement is global. It's bigger than just being a Trump supporter or a talking points GOP gate smasher. Show those who are willing to listen how to do the math. Rise to this occasion and save our country. Thank you.
So if everyone can form an orderly line here, we'll get started. And to clarify, we are going to be having one brief question and no follow-ups unless Mrs. Malkin asks specifically.
Okay, well, I already outed myself earlier. I could concede everything that you said in this lecture, and I could still ask you the question. Can't we still make an exception for DACA recipients who came here through no fault of their own? What does it cost us to at least give them permanent residence, if not citizenship? I could concede you everything else, deport literally every single one of them. We can still say them. Thank you.
So you caught the line where I talked about amnesty begetting amnesty begetting amnesty. And the same argument you're making now, well, what harm would it do? It's just a one-time thing, was the false bargain that we entered to in 1986. And when you create that magnet, it's just going to cause more people, it's going to induce more people to come across because they know that the Beltway is always going to give in. And so you are a liberal, you outed yourself as a liberal, and so I'm sure you pride yourself as somebody who is compassionate. And what you see when you advocate for 800,000 illegal alien students who came here through no fault of their own is what you're saying is, well, they shouldn't be punished. And what I'm saying is that behavior by their parents shouldn't be rewarded anymore. Enough is enough. And your compassion should be first for your fellow citizens who will become your fellow workers. DACA is not just about allowing college students to pursue their dreams. Why do you think big business supports it? You know who was funding all of the illegal aliens who marched onto the Supreme Court the other day for the DACA hearings? The Chamber of Commerce, Silicon Valley. They don't care about those 800,000 students. What they care is a supply of cheap labor workers. That's what it's all about. What's compassionate about that? What's compassionate about your role, and anybody in Open Borders Inc., whether they're on the left or the right, their role in participating and enabling and promoting a global human smuggling racket? Because that's what you're doing. It's not President Trump's fault that families are separated. That lies not only with the parents who are making these decisions, the illegal aliens who are already here enjoying amnesty or temporary protected status that's permanent, right? They're raising money, being illegally employed by employers who are never punished for breaking the laws as well, to pay coyotes to drag their kids or relatives or people who say that they're 18 across the desert, risk their lives, bring them with strangers, expose them to the probability of trafficking or engaging in violence, and then traipsing across the border. How do they get across the border? They have to pay a premium, a derecho de piso to the drug cartels. They're the ones making out. They don't care about those 800,000 people either. Reality.
While I agree with your stance on illegal immigration, I'm a little curious on your stance on decreasing legal immigration, particularly within the STEM fields, which you mentioned, because while there's 1 million unfilled STEM jobs and the unemployment rate for graduates is only at 3.8%, I'm curious to how you argue that they're stealing the jobs and not simply filling jobs that aren't being filled by our graduates.
I'm going to give you a homework assignment. It's a book I wrote with a former computer programmer named John Miano, who was priced out of the job market because of H-1B after the law was passed in 1990, and saw the damage that the cheap labor lobby in Silicon Valley, in cahoots with Indian outsourcers, was doing to the American IT workforce. Will you promise me that you'll read the whole book from cover to cover and do your homework and then come back and ask me questions?
I mean,
Because there is no
stats,
fact. There is no American IT tech worker shortage. Okay? Do your homework and look at the hundreds of thousands of STEM grads who are not working in their field because they're being priced out by low-wage journeymen from China and India.
Yes.
Give me your email address and I'll send you the book myself, free for Christmas.
Hi, Ms. Malkin. Thanks for having us speak here today. I appreciate that you acknowledged how Charlie Kirk had walked back his statements on stapling green card visas, and I think that's not the best idea for American workers, and because we're all graduates, we all are college students here, and we want to have a job when we graduate. I also wanted to ask you about the EB-5 visas, because Charlie Kirk is a supporter of that, and if you could just explain what that is and what your stance on that.
Yeah. So I would warn anyone who buys into his recent conversion on the stapling program to look at the answer that he gave that was elicited by a young nationalist, much smarter than him on these issues, where he blithely said that the EB-5 program was something that we should expand exponentially. And I reported on this in Sold Out, which you're going to read and which everybody should read, as well as did a documentary on it that aired on CRTV and is going to be on Newsmax as well. It is a massive racket. It basically puts American citizenship and green cards up for sale to the highest bidder. Now, if you're a free market conservative, you think this is a great idea, because then we're going to get the best and brightest from around the world who are wealthy and are going to benefit our economy because economic redevelopment math, right? And this is like a thing I call bullshit, and you should do the math. Because when you look at how the EB-5 program has worked, it is a crony program. And there used to be a time when Republicans were against it. For example, they were against it when the former governor of Virginia, Democrat Terry McAuliffe, crony of the Clintons, was using it to do business with Chinese environmental entrepreneurs. And they were supposed to invest in a business. It was supposed to create X numbers of jobs. And there are Beltway lobbyists who have a living. They make a living, right? There are all these academics who tell the truth about immigration and demographics, and they can't get a job in an ivory tower. But you can hire, you can do a rent-up Open Borders Inc. economist, and they'll cook up some numbers about how many jobs are generated. It's all paid for play. And in the meantime, there are many of these so-called economic redevelopment zones where EB-5 visas have been sold to largely Chinese wealthy so-called investors, where what you end up with is a hole in the ground, literally a hole in the ground. And I have a documentary that shows that. So perhaps I'll have to write another piece for American Greatness, and we'll get another change of heart pin.
Thank you for being on here. Thank you for not disavowing the young American nationalists. So my question is, Ben Shapiro back in 2014, 2015, he used to admit that the demographic shift that America was experiencing was going to be detrimental to the Republican Party in the future, but now he's sort of changed his tune. So back in 2014, I think he went on Red Eyes TV and talked about the demographic shift. In 2015, he sat down with Ann Coulter. He talked about completely stopping immigration because the demographic shift is changing America, changing states. I mean, look at what happened in Virginia, for instance. Republicans got trounced because of the demographic shift. For any of you out there who are Republicans or conservatives who are still sort of iffy on the whole limiting legal immigration, I'd just like to share a few stats with you. According to Pew Research, 72% of Hispanics say that we should, that hate speech is violence. Over 59% of Hispanics say that we should criminalize hate speech. And there was a recent poll that was done actually that said that we should have an amendment in our First Amendment that would criminalize hate speech. And if you break it down by demographics, you can see exactly who's voting for these things. So Ben Shapiro used to talk about all of these things. He completely changed his tune in 2016, much like Charlie Kirk recently changed his tune recently on the RAISE Act. All of a sudden he's supporting that, of course, and then he once called limiting legal immigration a wonky idea. Now he says that actually he supports the RAISE Act, and he says he got corrected by Tucker Carlson, actually, as a matter of fact, on the on the whole stapling green cards to the back of diplomas.
What's the question?
Are the donors for the Daily Wire mentioned in your book, Open Borders?
Yeah, I don't know who they are, but that is definitely, yeah.
Ferris Wilks.
Say it again.
Ferris Wilks.
Yeah, so all of a sudden
Yeah.
in 2016, he started to completely deny this. Like he said
Yeah.
that voting is malleable.
Yes.
Right.
So, and what I'll say is that the investigative mantra of Open Borders Inc., which should be the mantra of any young nationalist who's puzzling about these sudden changes of heart, is follow the money and find the truth. And as I've said, the truth doesn't always lead to comfortable places. And I've had a career over the last 25 years of calling out people who are purportedly on my side. And ironically, now that I've come out on the side of young nationalists, these same people in Conservatism Inc. accuse me, who has been consistent on this issue and has elevated it over the last 25 plus years, and it has been an uphill battle, even with so-called conservative media that we've come to know and love and trust, like Fox News, and I spent many years on there. But this is not an issue they're talking about. They're not talking about this incredibly important conflict and war that's going on between these factions on college campuses. Why aren't they talking about it? Controlled opposition. And yes, the donor class. I've talked about the Koch brothers. I used to go on the American for Prosperity circuit and talk about limited government and less regulation and out there on the campaign trail. And then, interestingly, I stopped getting invited to AFP events. And, instead, they redirected their money to things like the Libre initiative. It's got this patina of being for free market and assimilation. And what are they doing? They funded an illegal alien art exhibit at the Supreme Court. They put illegal aliens over American citizens and American students. And they're part of this juggernaut of pressing for not only mass illegal immigration, but mass legal as well. And I want to address again people who are sort of your mainstream of the conservative student movement, who are feeling nervous and who are buying the line that I'm some sort of scary supremacist and that the people that I defend are as well. Use your minds, okay? If you see 90-second clips of people that the conservative Inc. leaders are telling you are supremacists or anti-Semites, don't believe the 90-second clips, because you know where they come from? Soros Media Matters. Really? You're going to believe that? Spend some time. Do your homework. And know that the reason why this issue is so important is because it's about your future, and your future is the country's future.
But please do keep your questions short, brief. I appreciate the question, but to respect everybody's time,
well, I appreciate the statistics, and they need to get out there, so I appreciated the length of the question.
I'm Michelle. It's been very blessed for you to come visit in everybody's favorite state, right? Right. So my question for you is that
Microphone. Give him the microphone.
Oh.
That's better.
So very blessed for you to visit us right here at UCLA, and I also want to appreciate and give thanks for you for standing up to your principles and principles standing up for America First. With Nick Fuentes and our amphibian friends, the Goipers. And so, other than that, so my question for you is that, how does increasing legal immigration, especially high-skilled immigration, screws us young generations, millennials and Zoomers, in terms of our job prospects, society, family values, maintenance of conservative values and stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to sound like black-pilled or pessimistic, but I feel like we're in a decline, and legal immigration and stuff. I feel it's making it a bit worse. So, yeah.
Okay. I think you agree with my message.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's
yes.
It. Yeah.
So, to be clear, what I advocated in 2002 when I wrote my first book on immigration policy called Invasion, which is also a trigger word, I advocated a moratorium on immigration then, and I repeat that now. We need to take a pause. It is so vital because every aspect of our immigration system is overwhelmed. And that's not by accident, it's by design. And again, that is my appeal to people who are either on the fence or who haven't been as up on the issue or been distracted by all of the bread and circus, other side issues that I talk about. This is the central issue. We are a country of 325 million. All the projections are there, and they don't come from some right-wing kooky source. It's Pew Research Center. By 2045, we will be a majority-minority nation. We're losing it. And it's the same trend that you see across the world. And I talked about that so-called Great Replacement Theory, that all of the open borders Inc. types are trying to scare people away from contemplating it. Think about it and realize it. Do the math.
That's great. We just talked about the moratorium, because it kind of leads into my question.
Mm-hmm.
How culpable do you think the courts are in making it impossible for the president to enact an America First immigration policy? And if so, what's the solution to that?
Yes, so obviously that is central. And a great friend of mine, Daniel Horowitz, wrote another book that should be on the shelves of your repertoire called Stolen Sovereignty. And he talked about the role of the judiciary in sabotaging this vital function and the plenary powers in particular of the president to decide for whatever reason that if people shouldn't be here, that they should go. it's not just the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And, you know, for the last 25 plus years, that's been the refrain. It's sort of standard issue for Talking Points GOP people to blame the Ninth Circuit. Meanwhile, every lower court judge has designated themselves, you know, immigration saboteur in chief. And there is more, and Daniel talks about this in a lot of the work that he does, and his podcast is Must Listen as well. There's much more that the president could be doing, you know, on his own to stop this trend of all of these injunctions that are being issued in far-flung places and then applied to the entire country. But that gets to another aspect of it, which is the funding and basically the use of every law school in America as an organizing outfit. This is where all the social justice organizing happens. Every single law school is sending teams of pro bono lawyers down to the border in conjunction with Soros groups, like Al Acholado, for example, on both sides of the border, coaching and manufacturing asylum claims. And, you know, ever since the Flores settlement, doing everything in their power to lure people here illegally, and then have them go through the revolving door to disappear, wait for amnesty, and then vote Democrat.
I actually have a two-part question, if that's okay. The first part is the question is pertaining to previous college campus events by Turning Point USA, whose Q&A sections have been met with difficult to answer questions. So what do you think?
Vital, necessary questions. Yes, rude, but we need more rudeness, I think.
Yeah.
I would ask, what do you think of Charlie Kirk's response to them? For example, him like answering questions with a question, or not doing a Q&A as that happened with the Don Jr. event that happened also on this campus at More 100. So what do you think of Charlie Kirk's response to it in general?
Weak, cringe, and not the pose of somebody who has the courage of his convictions. And were I one of his advisors or donors, I would have said, take a break. Take a break. Take your own pause. You know, a culture war circuit moratorium, and do your homework. I'm serious about this, and parent, it's not easy to watch any young person be completely humiliated. But on the other hand, when these types of people are responsible for blanket smearing good faith patriots in this country, I can't really shed too many tears. And in particular, there are certain questions and answers that have been disseminated. And thank God for the individuals out there who live streamed it when live streams were canceled. By the way, I'm periscoping this right now. And, you know, my past two events haven't been live streamed, but others have. Power of social media, and I appreciate it. But if these types of events are to be meaningful and effective, then we need to have the best and brightest advocating for America first, and not people who don't believe what they say or change their minds when they're told to or pressured into it. Is the second part of the question okay? Yes, ma'am.
So how can we as the right deal with this obvious split between America First conservatism and the sort of establishment safe conservatism, especially in an election year like 2020?
Well, we're doing it. That's what this is for. And I don't shy away from it, and that's why I'm here. And, you know, although I am accused of being some sort of grifter, what do you think this is helping me? Right? Like, you know, when I did my CPAC speech in February, I stood there and I called out the leaders of CPAC for cuddling with Van Jones on the stage, right? I'm not going to get invited back to CPAC. And I'll use another refrain that I've used, I don't care. I don't care. Because there's more to life as a conservative activist. And this is my advice, not only to people who are now trying to figure out which side of this divide to stand on, right? But this is my advice. Act on principle. believe in the things that you advocate. I've often wondered, especially over the last couple of months that I've been on this book tour for Open Borders Inc. I've called out Matt Schlapp. I've called out members of the Republican Party, people that I used to work for, whether I would even have the opportunity to have a microphone and speak. I've worried about that. If you say safe things, if you agree to be co-opted and be part of the bread and circuses, you will never have to wake up and worry about such things. When I was finishing the manuscript to Open Borders Inc., I paid homage to many of the people over the last year that I was writing the book who had been deplatformed. Because I know and you know that the war on our borders, the war on our sovereignty, and the war on free speech are a triangle. They're all related. They're all under siege. And all of the people that have been deplatformed, many of them whom I name-checked, and many more who you can't even keep a list anymore, right? We have to speak for them as long as we have a platform. That's why I'm compelled to do what I do, even if it means risking never having another speaking gig again, and never getting on Fox News. I don't care.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's an honor to have you here. I agree with you on everything we see regarding the immigration patterns and how different demographics vote in the United States. But I think I probably have a little different opinion than you on like the solution. And one of the things I'd be kind of curious to hear about is how you think the conservative movement can bring more people into the fold of our party. If you look at it, obviously most of the demographics out, that are immigrating here are voting conservative, and we're rapidly losing white women in the suburbs and other groups in the suburbs. And how do we realistically gain more support for our movement in the long term?
Advocate unapologetically for America first, and teach those white suburban women how voting Democrat is screwing over their own kids and grandkids' future. And stop pandering. Stop pandering. If we can already deal with reality and concede that the vast influx of the people that are coming from third world countries and these jihadist breeding grounds and the whole rest of the world that we're bringing here and resettling into America are not going to vote Republican no matter what, then what do? You have to go to the base that has been betrayed time and time again. I lived through and fought the amnesty wars in 2006 and 2007, and then we had to watch John McCain march to the presidential nomination, and we were told to shut up, and we were told to hold our noses, while he then sneered, not only in the green rooms of Meet the Press, right, but also publicly, sneering at the wall, sneering at all the ranchers and Border Patrol agents and people who tried to take matters into their own hands and defend themselves. And that was the Republican nominee, and we did it over and over and over again. And, some of us, because we had been so accustomed to that, domestic abusive relationship, didn't immediately see the promise that President Trump held. And for me, I had picked another candidate because, that's kind of what we always did, and then waited. And then President Trump did something that made me decide decisively that I was going to vote for him. He brought angel families to the stage. And I knew that he was serious about it. Because after Romney lost, there was this post-mortem Republican retreat. And the likes of Reince Priebus held court. And they said it was our fault. And they said we needed to be more compassionate, and we needed to think about doing more diversity initiatives, and we needed to stop talking so harshly about immigration enforcement. Where has that gotten us? And so, my message to young nationalists is, like I said, this isn't about just supporting one candidate. because inevitably all politicians disappoint. And President Trump is up against a lot of forces. I document them all at Open Borders Inc. But the call is coming from inside the tent. We now have a DHS acting secretary who is a former registered lobbyist for Indian outsourcers. The lobby is called NASCOM, which I talk about in Sold Out. That's the acting DH secretary. So now he has made a gesture of recusing himself from all H-1B matters. This does not assure me any more than Charlie Kirk's immediate conversion on stapling green cards to diplomas. So we need to hold President Trump's feet to the fire, and if he abandons his base, like so many other Republican presidents and candidates before him, he will suffer the same fate.
Hello, thanks for being here, and I appreciate the group on campus for putting on this event as well.
Love your hat.
And the question that I have is, it's been brought up a couple different ways. One is really the America First kind of movement, revolution that's kind of happening and being underway. And the other part is a lot of times we hear people wanting to bring people onto the conservative side, and as we see pretty clearly, there are many shades of this kind of conservatism that we see. And when we talk about bringing people to our side, it's like, what does that really mean? And I don't see this kind of conservative liberal thing. And so my question to you is, for organizing on campuses where they have TPUSA, what kind of advice would you give to other students to organize in this manner to kind of push back, or would you say, hey, join TPUSA and infiltrate it from the inside? And also for others who are not in college, like what kind of advice or suggestions would you give for them to kind of meet together and kind of organize outside of here? Because a lot of your ideas are amazing, and it's something that everyone here is, or a lot of people here are behind, and it's, how do you...
Yes, I understand the question.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? What can you do? And I'm not a tactician. I'm not a political organizer beyond doing the work that I've done over the last couple of months organizing a Stand With ICE rallies, for example. I think that exercising your civic engagement and patriotism muscles is very important, especially in an atmosphere where we've got Antifa running rampant everywhere. So if you're young and you're able-bodied and you lift, I think, and I do, I've started lifting too, that's something that you should consider. You know, well, conservatives always make the excuse, oh, well, we've got jobs, so that's not something we do. Well, why the hell not? Why the hell not? When I held these Stand With ICE rallies in Aurora, Colorado, and Tacoma, which was targeted by that crazy Antifa militant, William Van Spronson, who left this radical manifesto that is allowed to circulate on Twitter despite its safety rules. And when I was in Montgomery County, Maryland, thousands of people came out. I'm organizing another Stand With ICE rally with anti-sanctuary activists, nationalists, Catholics who are woke. In Boston in the next week. And that's a simple little thing I'm doing. Like, I don't need to be there at every one of them. Like, you could do that here in LA, like every week or every day, right? And on campuses, what I'll say is this. Again, I'm not a tactician, but I don't think we need to create new institutions. I mean, yeah, God bless us this chapter. And these college Republicans are the ones responsible for that. And there are college Republican chapters where this divide and this debate is going on. And I'm going to do everything that I can to support the students within these institutions, to educate their peers and to prevail and win.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to campus to speak. Before I frame my question, I've been having trouble trying to frame it so it's the easiest to understand. But before I frame my question, I'd like to outline my position. And so I agree with stopping illegal immigration, and I agree with the problems caused by illegal immigration. And I believe in limiting legal immigration to those who are compatible with our culture, such as people who believe in our constitutional rights and who are striving for the American dream. And during the speech, I had a conflict with some of your sentiments behind your legal immigration stance. Not illegal. And that being your relation with race and voting records. So I believe that.
Oh, hold on, just stop
Sorry.
there a second. What is it that you dispute about the exit poll data that I cited that came from the Asian American Legal and Education Defense Fund after the elections last week?
Okay, so I don't dispute the data itself that they do tend to vote Democratic. I dispute the statement that you gave that their voting records are not disconnected from their race, and that's where my question comes in. So I believe that if legal immigrants are, if their voting, if we view their voting record and their voting patterns as not disconnected from their race, and we don't call out those who want to form policy based on race, or those who don't believe that all men are created equal with their rights endowed by the Creator, such as Nick Fuentes, aren't we as bad as those on the left for allying with race-based political actors?
So the question doesn't make any sense. Don't apologize.
I'm trying to
So
frame it.
it is a fact that Asians vote in these patterns, and the split in voter ID and on all of these social and limited government issues is what it is. Asians vote this way. Hispanics, as Vince pointed out, have voted 80-20 essentially, and it hasn't budged for years and years and years. What are you denying that these are the ethnicities of the blocks that I'm talking about? Like, you don't want me to say what their races and ethnicities and nationalities are? Okay, that's delusional. And it's lying to people to not talk about these facts and to not talk about the electoral implications of bringing 1 million of them every single year. So you want to smear anyone who talks about it based on caricatures of whether it's Nick Fuentes or anybody else or many of the people that I listed in my speech. And you say that you agree on illegal immigration. Okay. Do you want no limits on legal migration?
No, that's why I clarified my stance on.
How many legal?
No,
What numbers do you?
My stance on
What
legal immigration.
numbers of legal immigrants do you want to come into the country?
The
I
numbers
say
should-
0. What do you say?
I say the numbers shouldn't matter. It should be based on their actions. It should be based on if their culture is compatible to ours and if they're striving for an American dream.
Which countries?
We should base our immigration policies and the immigrants who come into the country based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
I want a complete moratorium on all immigration. Where did I say race? Where did I say race? So I take it, and just look at me, not your phone. I take it that you are against ethno-states. Is that correct?
That's correct. We should judge each other on the content of our character, not the color of our skin.
So, if we adopted Israel's immigration policy or Japan's, would you have a problem with that?
Could you specify the part of their immigration policy that you would endorse?
Oh, I would be happy to adopt Israel's immigration policy. They vigorously defend their security. They care for borders, and they care about the makeup of the people inside the country. Why can't we do the same? Israel first. America should be for America first. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I know you do. That's the talking point they always say. Build a wall. I get it.
Hi, thank you for coming out here tonight. Aside from demographic change, do you think that Conservative Inc.'s worship of free market capitalism and GDP will hurt the right in the long run, especially in the eyes of young people?
Absolutely. And it's such a profound question. And you're not allowed to talk about it in the Beltway think tank offices. And this has left a huge vacuum that the dumb Democrats won't fill, right? Andrew Yang is probably the closest, right, to understanding the implications of, this unbridled pursuit of the almighty dollar and profit, right, to the detriment of young American college students, grads, and workers like yourself. But Andrew Yang doesn't get it either, right?
Very true.
Like he was a false prophet.
Very true.
And like in a country of 325 million, there isn't a single person who can identify as a Democrat and fill that void and make it their platform. In the late 80s and 1990s, there was a brilliant Democrat on these issues, and she didn't just care about illegal immigration. She talked about the effects of mass migration, particularly on the Black community, which everybody says they care about. And that woman was Barbara Jordan of Texas. She headed up a bipartisan immigration reform commission. And that phrase has been so poisoned and become so toxic. People have become so cynical. But she thought very long and hard about what our policies should be. And it wasn't just about national security, it was about economic security as well. And so yes, Conservatism Inc.'s position in this certainly enriches all the people in Conservatism Inc., but it deprives the future of so many of you, millions of young Americans, and that's why I'm here to urge you to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you all for your wonderful questions. I'm going to end it with one final question I've been dying to ask. So to contextualize, I'm the son of an H-1B holder. My dad came here on an H-1B visa, and I think I've done pretty well for myself. I'm at UCLA on the pre-med track, hopefully going to med school. So my question here is, you mentioned these like tech shortages are not a real thing, right? You make this generalizing claim, but if we look at the specificities of it, right, like looking into fields like cybersecurity, we see that there are shortages, not only in workers, but also in a skills gap, because the people coming from India and China who are coming on these H-1B visas are the best of the best, they're the cream of the crop, right? So if we want to continue to maintain global hegemony, right, and not lose competitiveness to countries like China and to other countries like Russia, then I would argue that H-1B visas are quite necessary to continue that same trend in American global hegemony. So given these statistics, I've done my homework, I've researched the topic, I can email you the statistics after this talk. Given these statistics and
Did you read my book
arguments,
as part of your research?
Did
you read my book as part of your research?
No, I did not. But
you should.
I did a plethora of research on this. So given these statistics,
from the Cato
why
Institute?
should we continue to curb H-1B visas, given that we're going to lose global hegemony to countries like China?
Are you a Republican?
Yes, I'm a red-blooded American conservative.
Yeah. Do you care about the outcome of elections in your lifetime?
I care about America as a nation first, so I care about our competitiveness and not losing that to China.
Yeah, well, I recommend that you read the book and see how, quote unquote, best and brightest the vast majority of H-1Bs are. I'm not personally suggesting anything about, you said your dad was an H-1B. When did he come in?
Around 2000.
Okay. So even allowing for when your dad came in, right? And let's assume, and I'm sure you would argue, that your dad was one of the creme de la creme of H-1Bs that came in. Yeah. Well, in practice, that's not how it's worked. And the vast majority of H-1Bs have mediocre records compared to American counterparts. And what's happened in practice, here at Disney, for example, or Southern California Edison, or many large corporations on the East Coast, is that the best and brightest American tech workers have been forced to train their inferior H-1B substitutes as a condition of getting severance. That is stabbing American workers in the back. And they're not just all white. I did a documentary that I highly recommend that you watch on H-1B and its effect on a vast variety of white older workers, women workers, black workers, Asian American workers who've been here for 20, 25 years. There's age discrimination. There's citizenship-based discrimination. There are ads that go out for H-1B workers that American grads and STEM students do not have access to because they've been shut out by a cabal and lobby. And that's the reality. And you have to bridge the gap, the Grand Canyon-sized gap, between the reality and the rhetoric that comes from Talking Points GOP.
That's all. Really, I'll definitely get my hands on it and email you anything I find.
I guess I'll have to send you a free book too. Thank you very much.